I sat frozen at the Christmas table as everyone tore open gifts with my family's traditional excitement. Mom distributed presents to my siblings, cousins, even my new sister-in-law, skipping me completely. When the floor was littered with wrapping paper, I finally spoke up. "Did you forget me?" Mom laughed dismissively. "Oh, Fiona, we just forgot you." They expected tears. I'd always been their emotional punching bag. Instead, I smiled, calmly reached into my purse and said, "It's okay, look what I got myself." The room fell silent when they saw it. Being the middle child in the Turner family meant existing in a perpetual state of invisibility. From as early as I could remember, I occupied the thankless space between my older brother Jackson, the golden child who could do no wrong, and my younger sister Amanda, the baby whose every accomplishment was celebrated like she'd discovered the cure for cancer. Jackson was 35 now, a respected cardiologist at Boston Memorial, with a perfect wife, Claire, who my mother adored from the moment they met. A real catch, Mom would say, even though Claire rarely spoke up for herself and deferred to Jackson on everything from dinner choices to vacation destinations. But she looked good in photos and came from a good family, which was all that mattered to my status-obsessed parents. Amanda, 28, and the darling of the family, pursued her artistic dreams with my parents' full financial backing. She'd spent the last 5 years finding herself through various creative endeavors: photography, then pottery, then painting, each funded by my parents without question. Her apartment in the trendy part of town, her trips to find inspiration in Paris or Barcelona, all bankrolled by Mom and Dad's generosity. They displayed her mediocre artwork prominently in the living room, cooing over her exceptional talent to anyone who would listen. And then there was me, Fiona Turner, 32 years old, and forever the responsible one. The one who got straight A's, while also cooking dinner when Mom worked late. The one who helped Amanda with her homework while Jackson was praised just for showing up to his games. The one who worked 3 jobs to put herself through business school because the college fund my parents promised had mysteriously diminished right around the time Amanda decided she needed to study art in Florence for a semester. Christmas in the Turner household had always been an exercise in subtle disappointment for me. Each year followed the same pattern. I'd carefully select thoughtful gifts for everyone, spending weeks finding the perfect items that showed I paid attention to their lives. And each year I'd unwrap hastily purchased gift cards or generic sweaters in colors I never wore, while Jackson and Amanda received expensive, personalized presents. "We just know you're practical," Fiona, Mom would say, as if my practicality was a character flaw rather than a survival mechanism I'd developed in their household. Dad, William Turner, prominent attorney and pillar of the community, was no better. He'd beam with pride at Jackson's medical career, offering advice and connections while enthusiastically supporting Amanda's artistic journey. But when I'd sought his counsel about my career aspirations, his response was always a distracted, "You'll figure it out. You always do." I still remember the day that shattered any illusion I had about my place in the family. I was 24, home from grad school, searching through Dad's office for some tax documents I needed for my financial aid forms. That's when I found their will left carelessly on his desk. I hadn't meant to read it. I respect privacy. But my name jumped out at me from the page. My blood ran cold as I read the distribution of their estate, the family home, and 60% of their assets would go to Jackson to support his important work and family. 25% to Amanda, to ensure she can continue her artistic pursuits without financial constraint. And me. 15% with the notation, "Fiona is resourceful and responsible. She will be fine with less." I carefully replaced the will, my hands shaking, and never mentioned finding it. But something broke inside me that day. A final confirmation that in my parents' eyes, I would always be an afterthought. The responsible one who needed less deserved less, simply because I'd never made a fuss about being treated as less. That Christmas, I smiled through dinner as usual, helped clean up as usual, and returned to my apartment alone as usual. But something had changed. I made a promise to myself that night. I would build something of my own. Something that didn't depend on their approval or support. Something that would force them to see me, really see me for the first time. 2 years after discovering my parents' will, I found myself sitting in my corner office at Henderson Financial, staring at the rain streaming down the floor to ceiling windows. On paper, I had everything a 30-year-old should want: a prestigious position as a senior investment analyst, a comfortable salary, and the external validation that came with a nameplate on a 27th floor office in downtown Boston. But inside I was dying. Slowly, methodically, with each spreadsheet and client meeting, I felt pieces of myself disappearing. The panic attacks had started 6 months earlier, first just in the elevator on Monday mornings, then in meetings, and finally waking me in the middle of the night, gasping for air, as if someone was sitting on my chest. "You need to stick with something for once, Fiona," my mother had said during our weekly phone call when I'd cautiously mentioned I was considering a career change. "That's always been your problem. You never see things through." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my entire life seeing things through my education, my responsibilities, my career path, all according to their expectations. I'd never quit anything. But in the Turner family narrative, I was somehow both the responsible one and the flaky one, depending on which label was more convenient for them at the moment. Jackson had called later that week. "Mom's worried about you," he said, his voice carrying that familiar, condescending tone he'd perfected in medical school. "Have you considered antidepressants? I could refer you to someone." Not once did he ask if I was actually unhappy or why. Not once did he consider that perhaps the path I'd been following wasn't the right one for me. In his world, in my family's world, success had one definition and deviation meant failure. The breaking point came during a quarterly review meeting. As I presented my analysis to the investment committee, my vision began to tunnel, my words slurred, and I collapsed. The official diagnosis was exhaustion and anxiety, but we all knew it was a complete nervous breakdown. I spent 3 days in the hospital. Mom and Dad sent flowers but didn't visit, too busy with Amanda's gallery opening the card, explained. Jackson stopped by for exactly 7 minutes between appointments, patted my hand, and told me to get it together. That night, alone in my hospital room, I made the decision. I drafted my resignation letter on my phone, submitted it via email, and turned off my notifications. By morning, I was officially unemployed for the first time since I was 15. What my family didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd been planning my escape for months. The business degree they'd dismissed as predictable had actually taught me something valuable: how to recognize opportunity. For years, I'd been quietly observing a gap in the market. While working at the bank, I'd noticed how many people yearned for authentic artisanal home goods, but struggled to find unique pieces that weren't mass-produced. I'd always had a talent for design and craftsmanship inherited from my grandmother, who'd taught me to sew, carve, and create during the summers I spent with her, the only times in my childhood when I felt truly seen. In the evenings after work and on weekends, I'd been designing and creating prototype products: hand-carved wooden serving boards, hand-dyed textiles, pottery with distinctive glazes I'd developed through endless experimentation. I'd called it hearth and heritage, a nod to my grandmother's belief that a home should tell your story through the objects you surround yourself with. 2 months before my breakdown, I'd launched a simple online store, expecting maybe a few sales from friends or colleagues. What happened instead shocked me. My first collection sold out in 3 days. The second, expanded collection, sold out in 2. Customers began messaging me about wholesale opportunities, custom designs, and collaboration requests. The money I'd saved for a rainy day, another of my practical habits my family had mocked, went into securing a small workshop space in a converted warehouse. Of course, I told my family none of this. As far as they knew, I was still at Henderson Financial, still the reliable, predictable Fiona who had followed the prescribed path. Our weekly calls continued, with their usual pattern updates about Jackson's important cases, Amanda's artistic breakthroughs, and cursory questions about my same old life that they barely waited for me to answer. "The holiday party at the club is going to be spectacular this year," Mom told me during our November call. "Claire's family is flying in from California, and Amanda's bringing someone special, a gallery owner she met in New York. We've reserved the large table, of course." "I'll be there," I said, not mentioning that I'd be coming straight from a meeting with my new business manager and the 4 artisans I'd recently hired to keep up with production demands. By December, Hearth and Heritage had outgrown the workshop space. We'd been featured in 3 prominent design magazines, had a waiting list for custom orders that stretched into next summer, and had just received our first inquiry from a national retailer interested in carrying a specialized collection. I was working harder than I ever had at the bank, often 16-hour days, 7 days a week. But for the first time in my life, I felt alive. The panic attacks had stopped. I slept soundly despite the shorter hours. Every morning I woke up excited about the day ahead. 2 weeks before Christmas, standing in my expanded workshop surrounded by employees who respected me and products I was proud of, I made another decision. It was time to stop hiding. The annual Turner family Christmas dinner would be the perfect opportunity to finally reveal my truth and maybe, just maybe, to finally be seen. The Turner family home looked like something from a Hallmark Christmas movie. White colonial with perfect green shutters, professionally hung garlands and twinkling lights, outlining every architectural feature. A massive wreath on the glossy red door. As I parked my modest sedan between Jackson's luxury SUV and Amanda's vintage convertible, a necessary expense for her artistic image, according to my parents, I took a deep breath and gathered my strength. The trunk of my car was filled with carefully wrapped gifts, each selected with genuine thought. For Jackson, a set of antique medical texts I'd found through a rare book dealer. For Claire, a hand-embroidered tablecloth. I'd made myself incorporating elements from her family's Portuguese heritage. For Amanda, custom-designed art supplies housed in a wooden case I'd carved with scenes from her favorite childhood story. For Dad, a chess set with pieces modeled after historical legal figures. And for Mom, a jewelry box, lined with silk and inlaid with mother-of-pearl, a project that had taken me over 50 hours to complete. Each gift represented not just time and money, but something more valuable: attention. Proof that I listened when they spoke, that I remembered the details of their lives, that I cared enough to create or find something that would speak to who they truly were. Part of me still hoped, childishly, perhaps, that such thoughtfulness might finally elicit reciprocal care. "There she is," Mom called out as I struggled through the door with the armful of packages. Patricia Turner, at 62, looked a decade younger thanks to rigorous skincare routines and subtle cosmetic procedures. Her cashmere sweater and pearls constituted casual holiday attire in her world. She air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to smudge her perfect lipstick. "You're the last to arrive as usual. Everyone's in the living room. William just opened the good scotch. No offer to help with the packages. No comment on how nice I looked in my carefully selected burgundy dress. No genuine happiness to see me. Just the subtle reminder that I was, as always, falling short of expectations." The living room buzzed with conversation that hushed momentarily as I entered. Dad nodded from his position by the fireplace, tumbler in hand. "Fiona. Traffic bad." "Not too bad," I said, though no one was really listening. The conversation had already resumed, centered around Jackson, who was holding court in the middle of the room. The chief of surgery himself called me in, he was saying, gesturing expansively. Said he wouldn't trust anyone else with the procedure. Claire sat beside him, nodding supportively, and occasionally touching his arm in adoration. My cousin Ethan and his wife Melissa were listening with exaggerated interest, while Amanda sprawled artfully on the floor, her latest accessory, a tall, bearded man with an expensive-looking camera beside her. I placed my gifts under the enormous tree and accepted the glass of wine Mom pressed into my hand. "Just one for you, dear. Someone needs to stay clear-headed," she whispered, though no one had ever seen me have more than 2 drinks at a family gathering. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, crystal and silver gleaming under the chandelier. I was seated at the far end of the table between my teenage cousin Ryan, who was fully absorbed in his phone, and Great-Aunt Mildred, whose hearing loss made conversation nearly impossible. "So," Mom said during a lull, her voice carrying down the table to me, "Fiona still at the bank?" What is it now, 5 years? Actually, I began, but Jackson interrupted. Mom, Claire, and I have an announcement. He stood clinking his knife against his crystal glass. We wanted to wait until the family was all together. Claire blushed and placed her hand over her still flat stomach. We're pregnant. Due in July. The table erupted. Mom actually squealed something I'd never heard her do before. Dad clapped Jackson on the back, with tears in his eyes. A grandchild. The first Turner of the next generation. For the next 20 minutes, the conversation revolved entirely around the future baby gender speculation, name discussions, debates about which family features would be passed down. He'll have the Turner intelligence, certainly, Mom said, beaming at Jackson. And hopefully, Claire's patience. Can you imagine? Perhaps another doctor in the family? I offered my congratulations, genuinely happy for them despite the familiar pang of being forgotten in the excitement. As the discussion finally began to settle, I opened my mouth to share my own news only to be interrupted again. Since we're doing announcements, Amanda said, standing dramatically, and pulling her bearded companion up beside her. This is Pascal. As you know, what you don't know is that he's not just my boyfriend. He's the owner of Lumiere Gallery in Paris, and he's offered me a residency and exhibition. I'm moving to France in January. Another explosion of excitement. Mom was practically glowing with pride. My daughter exhibiting in Paris. William, did you hear? Dad was already pouring champagne. A toast to Amanda and her extraordinary talent, finally being recognized internationally. Pascal launched into an elaborate description of the exhibition space and the Parisian art scene, with Amanda interjecting breathlessly about her creative vision and how this was just the beginning of her international career. I sat silently pushing food around my plate, the familiar feeling of invisibility settling over me like a heavy blanket. Not once did anyone think to ask about my life, my work, my achievements. When dessert was served, Mom turned to cousin Ethan's wife. Melissa, how's that little business of yours doing, the online thing? Melissa brightened. Really well, actually. We've expanded to 3 employees, and our revenue doubled this quarter. How lovely, Mom said, her tone making clear she found it anything but. Though I've always thought there's something a bit sad about these internet businesses. No real connection, you know. Not like real work. Exactly, Dad chimed in. No substitute for an established career with a reputable company. Security benefits, a clear advancement path. That's what builds a life. Speaking of which, Jackson added, looking directly at me for the first time that evening. How's Henderson Financial treating you? Fi. Still on track for that promotion? You mentioned last year. All eyes turned to me expectantly. This was my opening. My chance to tell them about Hearth and Heritage. About the thriving business I'd built from nothing. About my success on my own terms. But, looking at their faces, the mixture of polite disinterest and preemptive judgment, I found myself saying, everything's fine. Same as always. The conversation moved on immediately, my predictable life requiring no further discussion. As they debated the merits of various private schools for Jackson's unborn child and the best neighborhoods in Paris for Amanda's new adventure, my phone buzzed in my purse. Excusing myself to the restroom, I checked the notification. It was from Taylor Wilson, my recently hired operations director, and coincidentally the daughter of my parents' longtime social rivals, the family they'd always considered new money and beneath them. The message contained a single photo, the signed contract with Nelson Home, the largest high-end department store chain in the country. They wanted an exclusive Hearth and Heritage collection in all 47 locations with prominent display placement and a feature in their spring catalog. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, the magnitude of this achievement washing over me. This wasn't just a business success, this was validation on a national scale. This was everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, for everything I'd built, while my family was busy dismissing me, and they had no idea. For a moment, I considered rushing back to the table, interrupting the Paris apartment discussion to share my news. But something stopped me. A realization, perhaps, that their validation wasn't what I was seeking anymore. Or maybe a desire to choose the perfect moment. A moment when they couldn't possibly overshadow or diminish what I'd accomplished. I returned to the table, tucking my phone away with a small, secret smile. Dessert plates were being cleared, and Mom was standing up. Well, shall we move to the tree? It's gift time. The Turner family gift exchange had always been a carefully choreographed production. Mom insisted we take turns opening presents one at a time to fully appreciate each thoughtful selection. In reality, it was another opportunity for hierarchy display. The order of opening always the same, starting with Dad as head of the family, then Jackson as firstborn son, then Amanda as the cherished baby, then extended family members in order. Of Mom's favor with me inevitably somewhere toward the end. This year, we gathered in the living room as usual, everyone finding their designated spots. Dad, in his leather armchair, Mom perched on its matching ottoman, Jackson and Claire on the love seat, Amanda and Pascal, sprawled artfully on floor cushions, and various cousins, aunts, and uncles, distributed among the remaining furniture. I found a space on the edge of the sofa beside Great-Aunt Mildred, who was already nodding off after her second sherry. William, you start, Mom directed, handing Dad a large, elegantly wrapped box. From Jackson and Claire, he read from the tag, then carefully unwrapped it to reveal a limited edition whiskey decanter set. Magnificent. Just what I wanted. Next came Mom's gift from Dad, an extravagant diamond bracelet that elicited appropriate gasps from the assembled family. William, you shouldn't have, she protested weakly already, fastening it around her wrist and tilting it to catch the light. Jackson and Claire opened their gifts next, a pair of first-class tickets to the Maldives from my parents. For one last romantic getaway before the baby designer, baby items from Amanda, and various other expensive offerings from extended family members. When Jackson opened my gift, he seemed genuinely surprised. These are antique medical texts. He examined them with newfound interest. Some of these are quite rare. How did you find them? Before I could answer, Mom intervened. Isn't that nice? Amanda, your turn, darling. Amanda tore through her gifts with childish enthusiasm, an expensive camera from our parents' art supplies from various relatives, and a weekend spa package to relax before your big Paris adventure. When she opened my handcrafted case, she ran her fingers over the carved scenes with unexpected appreciation. Fiona, did you make this? It's actually beautiful. She looked up at me with something approaching respect. These are scenes from The Secret Garden, my favorite book when we were kids. You remembered. I nodded, a small warmth blooming in my chest at her recognition. I carved it myself. The supplies inside are custom-mixed pigments that should work with your current technique. For a moment, there was a connection between us, a flash of the closeness we might have had under different circumstances. But Mom was already moving on, distributing gifts to the extended family members. Great-Uncle Harold received monogrammed golf towels. Cousin Ethan and Melissa got matching luggage for their upcoming anniversary trip. Even teenage Ryan got the latest gaming console with 3 new releases. Each gift was announced, admired, and added to growing personal piles. As the process continued, I noticed something odd. No gifts were being passed to me. Not from my parents, not from my siblings, not even from the cousins with whom I'd exchanged presents for decades. I watched as the pile of unwrapped presents grew and the stack of wrapped ones dwindled. Still, my name wasn't called. The floor was now littered with discarded wrapping paper and ribbon. Everyone had a collection of gifts beside them. Everyone except me. An uncomfortable silence began to settle over the room as this fact became increasingly obvious. Finally, Cousin Ryan, 16, and therefore still lacking the family's refined ability to ignore uncomfortable truths, blurted out, "Hey, Where are Fiona's presents? All eyes turned to my conspicuously empty lap. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Not from embarrassment, but from a slow-building anger I'd suppressed for 3 decades. Did you forget me? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Mom looked flustered for just a moment before letting out a dismissive laugh. Oh, Fiona, we just forgot you. With all the excitement about the baby and Amanda's exhibition. You know how it is. The casual cruelty of her response hung in the air. You know how it is. As if being completely forgotten by your entire family was a common occurrence, a minor oversight rather than a devastating revelation of exactly where you stood in their estimation. Dad reached for his wallet. Tell you what, I'll write you a check. You can get yourself something nice. Jackson and Claire exchanged uncomfortable glances. Amanda at least had the decency to look genuinely distressed. Mom, that's horrible. We can't just... I must have gotten something for Fiona. Let me look. But I knew she hadn't. None of them had. After 3 decades of being the afterthought, the reliable one, the one who didn't need the attention or consideration they had collectively, decided I didn't even merit the most basic recognition on a day centered around giving. I could see them bracing for what they expected. Tears a scene. Perhaps the emotional breakdown of fragile Fiona they'd been predicting for years. My role was clear. Accept the slight, with good grace, perhaps make a self-deprecating joke about being forgettable, and continue being the emotional punching bag for the Turner family dynamic. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This moment, this blatant, undeniable demonstration of exactly what they thought of me was actually freeing. No more pretending. No more hoping for recognition or validation that would never come. I smiled, reaching deliberately into my purse. It's okay, look what I got myself. Every eye in the room followed my hand as I pulled out a slim leather portfolio embossed with the Hearth and Heritage logo I'd designed myself. The elegant ampersand caught the light, the careful tooling showing quality even from a distance. What's that? Mom asked, her voice carrying a note of confusion I'd rarely heard. The room fell completely silent as I opened the portfolio and removed the documents inside. My moment had finally arrived. This, I said, holding up the first document, is the deed to Hearth and Heritage, a company I founded 2 years ago after leaving Henderson Financial. The shock on my parents' faces was immediate. Dad's whiskey glass froze halfway to his mouth. You left the bank. When? Why? Weren't we informed? I ignored his questions and continued, my voice steady. Hearth and Heritage specializes in handcrafted home goods, furniture, textiles, decorative items. Each piece is designed either by me or by one of the 12 artisans I now employ. You employ people? Jackson sounded genuinely confused, as if the concept of me being in charge was beyond his comprehension. Yes, Jackson. I employ people. I also manage our production facility, oversee our e-commerce platform, and personally handle our major client relationships. I removed another document from the portfolio. Speaking of which, this is the contract I just signed with Nelson Home to feature our products in all 47 of their locations nationwide beginning next spring. Amanda sat up straighter. Nelson Home. The luxury department store. But they're really exclusive. I know, I said simply. That's why they approached us. Our aesthetic and commitment to quality aligns with their brand values. Approached you? Mom repeated, her perfectly manicured hand fluttering to her throat. What do you mean? Approached you? I mean, Mom, that Hearth and Heritage has become one of the most sought-after artisanal brands in the home goods market. We've been featured in Design Today Modern Living, and last month Architectural Digest ran a 6-page spread on our winter collection. The mention of Architectural Digest, the holy grail of publications in my mother's social circle, finally seemed to penetrate. Her expression shifted from confusion to something resembling respect. You've been in Architectural Digest. Why didn't you tell us? I've tried to tell you, many times. But there was always something more important to discuss: Jackson's latest surgery, Amanda's newest artistic direction, the country club renovations. Pascal, Amanda's Parisian gallery owner boyfriend, suddenly leaned forward. Wait, Hearth and Heritage, I know this brand. The carved serving boards with the inlaid semi-precious stones. The hand-loomed textiles with the distinctive dye process. I nodded, surprised, and somewhat pleased at his recognition. We have them in our apartment in the Marais, he said, turning to Amanda. Remember the blue and gold table runner you admired? And the walnut cheese board? Amanda's eyes widened. That's your company. For the first time in our adult lives, she was looking at me with something approaching awe. Those pieces cost a fortune. They cost what handmade, ethically produced, high-quality items should cost. I corrected gently. We pay our artisans fairly, use sustainable materials, and don't cut corners on production. Claire suddenly gasped. I just realized my mother gave us Hearth and Heritage candlesticks for our anniversary. The ones with the intertwined wood and brass. They're stunning. We display them in our dining room. The Helix collection, I confirmed. One of our best sellers. Dad had recovered enough to try reasserting control. This is all very surprising, Fiona. But surely this is just a small operation. A hobby business. In response, I withdrew another document, our most recent financial statement. Hearth and Heritage will gross $4 million this year, with a profit margin of 22%. We're projecting $8 million next year with the Nelson Home contract. We recently expanded into a 10,000 square foot production facility in the Riverside Arts District, and we'll be opening our first flagship retail store in the spring. The numbers silenced him. $4 million was significant by anyone's standards, and certainly more than he'd expected his practical, reliable middle child to achieve on her own. But why keep this a secret? Mom demanded, her tone suggesting I'd deliberately deceived them rather than simply given up trying to be heard. It wasn't a secret, Mom. I've mentioned my new business venture at least a dozen times over the past 2 years. You always change the subject. Jackson was examining the financial statement with newfound interest. $4 million? That's impressive for a startup. Have you considered bringing on investment partners? I have some contacts who might be interested in. We're not seeking investment, I interrupted calmly. We're entirely self-funded and intend to stay that way. I own 100% of the company, but with the right connections, Dad began, you could scale much faster. William Turner Jr. at First Boston is an old golf buddy I could make a call. No thank you, I said firmly. I've built this company my way at my pace with my vision. That's how it will continue to grow. Cousin Ethan's wife, Melissa, was looking at me with open admiration. Fiona, this is incredible. I've actually been following your Instagram account for months. I had no idea it was your company. Your growth strategy is brilliant. Before I could thank her, my phone buzzed again. Checking it briefly, I couldn't help but smile at the message from Taylor. Downtown deal closed. Keys in hand. Is something funny? Mom asked, a note of her usual disapproval creeping back into her voice. Not funny. Satisfying. I tucked my phone away and pulled out one final document from my portfolio. This is the deed to the Carson building downtown. I just purchased it. The silence that followed was deafening. The Carson building was a historic property in the heart of downtown. A beautiful Art Deco landmark that had housed the city's premier law offices and financial institutions for generations. My parents had often spoken of its elegance, its prestige, its old money pedigree. That's not possible, Dad finally sputtered. The Carson has been owned by the Winthrop Trust for 60 years. They would never sell to someone like me. I finished for him. Perhaps not. But they would sell to someone who could afford their asking price and had a vision for preserving the building's historic character while bringing it into the 21st century. Hearth and Heritage will occupy the main floor as our flagship store, with our design studios and corporate offices on the second floor. The remaining space will be leased to compatible businesses. Dad's face had gone pale. The Carson building had been his white whale, the property he'd coveted, but could never quite afford throughout his career. And now his overlooked, underestimated middle child had acquired it without even mentioning her intention. Where did you get the capital for something like that? He asked weakly. I told you Hearth and Heritage is profitable. Very profitable. And I've always been good at saving, investing wisely, and seeing opportunity where others don't. I closed the portfolio with a decisive snap. Which reminds me I should formally introduce you to my Chief Operating Officer. You actually know her, Taylor Wilson. She started with me 6 months ago. If the Carson building announcement had been a shock, the mention of Taylor Wilson was a thunderbolt. The Wilsons had been my parents' social rivals for decades. New money versus old, competing for the same board positions and club memberships. Their children perpetually compared and contrasted at every opportunity. Taylor Wilson. Mom repeated, her voice faint. Mary Ann and Richard's daughter. The one who graduated from Wharton with honors and spent 5 years at Deloitte before joining Hearth and Heritage. Yes, that's her. She's brilliant with operations and has been instrumental in our expansion. The look of absolute bewilderment on my mother's face was something I would treasure forever. Her carefully constructed social hierarchy had just been upended completely. Not only was her overlooked daughter suddenly a successful entrepreneur, but she had aligned herself with the family. Mom had spent years subtly denigrating at every point the opportunity. Well, Jackson said after a long, uncomfortable silence. This is certainly unexpected. Congratulations, Fiona. His words opened the floodgates. Suddenly, everyone was offering congratulations, asking questions about the company, claiming they'd always known I had potential. Great Aunt Mildred, who had been silently observing the entire scene, suddenly cackled with delight. William, Patricia, looks like you backed the wrong horses. She raised her sherry glass in my direction. To Fiona. The only one of you with any real backbone. In the midst of the chaos that followed, Mom trying to regain control of the narrative, Dad attempting to position himself as my proud supporter, Jackson and Amanda recalibrating their understanding of our family dynamic, I sat quietly, finally. Visible, in a way I had never been before. For the first time in 32 years, all eyes were on me. And it felt exactly as I had imagined it would, not because I needed their approval anymore, but because I had finally proven to myself that I never needed it in the first place. The remainder of the evening transformed into a surreal performance as my family scrambled to adjust to this new reality. Mom, ever the social choreographer, recovered first. Darling, she said, her voice syrupy with sudden affection. I actually do have a gift for you. It must have gotten misplaced in all the excitement. She hurried to the hall closet and returned with a hastily wrapped small package that I was certain hadn't existed 20 minutes earlier. Based on the distinctive blue box visible through the thin tissue paper, she'd repurposed something from her emergency gift drawer. The collection of generic luxury items she kept on hand for unexpected social obligations. Here you are, she said, presenting it with a flourish. I was saving it for last because it's so special. I accepted the package with a polite smile. Inside was a silver picture frame still, with the price sticker partially visible on the back. It's lovely, I said, simply setting it aside without further comment. I thought you could use it in your new office. She added, desperation creeping into her voice. For a family photo, perhaps? We should take one tonight while everyone's here. Dad had moved to the bar to refresh his drink, but I could see his mind working, recalibrating his approach. He returned and settled into the chair beside me, a first in family gatherings where he typically maintained his patriarchal distance. Fiona, we should discuss this Carson building acquisition. The tax implications alone are significant. I'd be happy to connect you with my financial team. Thank you, but I have excellent tax advisors. Well, at minimum, let me review the paperwork. Property of that magnitude comes with complex legal considerations. The contracts have been finalized, Dad. My legal team handled everything. His eyebrows shot up. Your legal team? Who did you hire? Westbrook, Phillips, and Chen. The name of the prestigious firm his longtime competitors left him momentarily speechless. I could almost see him mentally calculating the retainer fees such a firm would command, another data point in his revised assessment of my financial standing. Jackson, never one to be sidelined for long, inserted himself into the conversation. "So, little sister, you've been holding out on us." His tone was jovial, but I recognized the competitive edge beneath it. "We should talk about your long-term strategy. Financial management for a company that size is complex. I could help you set up a proper investment structure. That's thoughtful but unnecessary. I work with Carson Financial Group." Carson. "They only take clients with portfolios over." He stopped himself, recalculating. "Well, they're adequate for now, I suppose. But as you grow, you'll want more sophisticated guidance. I know several excellent wealth managers through my hospital board connections." Before I could respond, Claire touched my arm tentatively. "Your products are so beautiful, Fiona. I'd love to help with marketing. My sorority sister works in PR for luxury brands, and I'm sure she'd—" "We have a waiting list of 3,000 customers and have never spent $1 on traditional marketing," I said gently. "But thank you for the offer." Amanda had been uncharacteristically quiet, studying me with new eyes. Finally, she spoke. "So, this is why you never seemed jealous when Mom and Dad funded my art pursuits. You were building something of your own all along." It was perhaps the most insightful thing she'd ever said to me. I nodded. "That's actually really impressive." "Hey." She hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about designing some textile patterns. Maybe we could collaborate. My artistic vision combined with your business platform could be interesting." "Amanda, that's brilliant," Mom exclaimed, seizing the opportunity. "A family collaboration, the Turner women creating together. We could host a launch event at the country club. I'll speak to the events coordinator tomorrow." Actually, Pascal interjected, a collaboration with Hearth and Heritage could be featured in my gallery's spring exhibition in Paris. The intersection of fine art and functional design is very a la mode right now. I watched with detached amusement as they began planning my company's future without me, exactly as they'd planned my life, without my input for 3 decades. The transformation was remarkable. An hour ago, I'd been the forgettable middle child, not worth a Christmas gift. Now I was the golden goose they all wanted access to. "While I appreciate everyone's sudden interest in my business," I said, interrupting their planning session, "Hearth and Heritage already has its product roadmap set through next year. Our design collaborations are established months in advance. But surely you can make an exception for family," Mom insisted, her smile tight. "That wouldn't be fair to our existing partners," I explained. "Or to our customers who value our careful curation." Dad cleared his throat. "Speaking of family, Fiona, now that you're established, you should join us at the country club. I could propose you for membership next month. The connections alone would be valuable for someone in your position." "The country club's demographic doesn't align with our target market," I said politely. "But thank you." "Nonsense. Those are exactly the people who would buy luxury home goods. The annual charity auction could feature your— what did you call them? The Helix candlesticks. Our customer base is actually much broader, professionals in their 30s and 40s who value craftsmanship and sustainability over traditional luxury markers. And we already donate to several charities aligned with our values." Mom's eyes narrowed slightly at my continued resistance. "Well, at minimum, you must come to the Hendersons' New Year's Gala. Everyone who's anyone will be there. As a successful businesswoman, you should be expanding your social circle." I smiled. "I already have plans for New Year's Eve. The company is hosting a celebration for our employees and their families. You're choosing staff over your own family on a holiday?" Her incredulity was genuine. "They are the people who helped build Hearth and Heritage. They deserve to celebrate our success." Cousin Ethan, who had been listening intently to the entire exchange, suddenly laughed. "You know what's funny? I actually applied for a job at Hearth and Heritage last month. Design department. Got rejected." All eyes turned to him in surprise. "Really?" I asked, genuinely curious. I don't recall seeing your application. I didn't use the Turner name, he admitted. Wanted to get in on merit, not family connection. Applied as Ethan Miller, my mother's maiden name. Ah. I nodded, remembering the application now. Your portfolio showed promise, but lacked the specific experience we needed for that position. You should try again when the junior design position opens in February. He looked startled at my specific knowledge of his application. You actually review all the applications yourself. I'm still involved in all creative hiring decisions, yes. It's central to maintaining our design standards. This simple exchange shifted the room's energy once again. The realization that I was not just a figurehead, but an active, knowledgeable leader of a successful enterprise seemed to finally sink in for everyone present. Great-Uncle Harold, who rarely spoke at family gatherings, suddenly addressed me directly. Young lady, I've been listening to all this, and I have just one question. Are you happy? The simplicity of his question cut through the tension. For the first time that evening, I felt tears threatening not from hurt or anger, but from the unexpected recognition of what actually mattered. Yes, I said softly. I'm happier than I've ever been. He nodded, satisfied. Then the rest is just noise. The doorbell rang, providing a welcome interruption. Mom frowned. Who could that be? We're not expecting anyone else. Dad went to answer it and returned with a confused expression. Fiona, there's a delivery for you. Behind him came a delivery person carrying an elaborate gift basket. Delivery for Miss Fiona Turner. I stood to accept it. Thank you. The family watched with undisguised curiosity as I read the card attached. To the visionary behind Hearth and Heritage. Your leadership inspires us daily. Happy holidays from your entire team. The basket contained an assortment of handcrafted items, some from our own collections, others clearly made especially for me by my artisans. A hand-thrown mug, with Boss Lady painted in our signature glaze. A small wooden sculpture of our logo. A leather-bound notebook with my initials tooled into the cover. These genuine gifts, thoughtfully created by people who knew me, who saw me, who valued me, not for my family connection, but for who I actually was, moved me deeply. They seem to think highly of you, Amanda observed, a note of envy in her voice. We think highly of each other, I corrected gently. That's what makes Hearth and Heritage special. As I carefully repacked the basket, my phone buzzed with another message. It was a photo from Taylor Wilson, my team gathered for their holiday dinner at the production facility, raising glasses in a toast. The caption read, Missing our fearless leader tonight. Don't let the Turners keep you too long. Looking at their smiling faces, I made a decision. The performance had gone on long enough. I should go, I announced, standing and gathering my things. My team is having their holiday dinner, and I promised I'd stop by. You're leaving. Now Mom looked genuinely shocked. But we haven't had dessert. Or coffee. The family is all together. I've been here for hours, Mom. I've opened my gift. I've shared my news. I've listened to everyone's advice. Now I have other people expecting me, people who didn't forget I exist until I had something they wanted. The bluntness of my statement hung in the air. For once, no one rushed to fill the silence with excuses or deflections. Will you come back for New Year's, Dad? Finally asked, his tone uncertain. I'll think about it, I said, which was more honesty than they perhaps deserved. Thank you for dinner. The ham was excellent. As I collected my coat, Jackson approached me. Fiona? Wait. He seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Perhaps for the first time in his life. I'm sorry. We didn't have a gift for you. It was thoughtless. It wasn't thoughtless, Jackson. That's the problem. It was entirely thoughtful. A perfect reflection of where I've always stood in this family. The forgotten one. The afterthought. The one who's so responsible she doesn't need attention or recognition. He flinched slightly. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me honestly, when was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing? When was the last time any of you showed genuine interest in my life? Not as an afterthought to talking about yourselves. Not as a perfunctory, social obligation. But because you actually cared. His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. I buttoned my coat. Congratulations again on the baby. I'm sure you'll be a wonderful father. And with that final grace note, genuine good wishes despite everything, I walked out of the Turner family Christmas gathering, leaving stunned silence in my wake. 3 days after Christmas, I sat in my new office in the Carson building, surrounded by moving boxes and the remnants of the previous tenant's decor. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floors. The space still smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Taylor knocked and entered without waiting for a response. Our working relationship had long since dispensed with unnecessary formality. The Nelson Home merchandising team wants to move up the launch date, she said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. They're seeing increased demand in the home goods sector and want our collection ready for early March instead of April. Can production handle the accelerated timeline? Already ran the numbers with Marcus. We'd need to bring on 3 additional artisans, but he has people in mind, former apprentices who know our methods. The materials are already ordered for the full run, so that's not an issue. I nodded, impressed as always by her efficiency. Make it happen. And make sure the team gets the overtime compensation they deserve for the push, already factored into the budget. She hesitated, then asked, "How are you doing?" After the whole Christmas reveal drama, I smiled at her directness, one of the qualities that made her such an effective COO and increasingly a valued friend. Surprisingly okay. It was. Clarifying. Clarifying how? I've spent years, my whole life, really hoping for their validation. Waiting for them to see me, to value what I bring to the table. But standing there in that living room, watching them scramble to reposition themselves once they realized I had something they wanted, it finally hit me. Their approval was never going to fill the hole I thought it would. Taylor nodded. Family validation is overrated. Trust me. I know. Given her own complicated relationship with parents who had treated her as a social climbing accessory rather than a person I knew she did understand. Have they called? She asked. Nonstop, I admitted. Mom wants to host a celebration dinner for my entrepreneurial achievement. Dad wants to introduce me to his banking connections. Jackson's offering investment advice. Amanda's sent 3 different textile design concepts. And how does that make you feel? I considered the question carefully. Sad, mostly. That it took financial success for them to see me as worth their time. But also, free. I don't need to chase their approval anymore. That part of my life is over. So what now? Full family estrangement. Holiday cards. Only polite distance. Honestly, I'm not sure yet. I think there's a middle path, setting boundaries without burning bridges completely. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. William, and I would love to tour your new building. Lunch next week? We're so proud of what you've accomplished. I showed Taylor the message. Proud now that you've proven yourself without their help, she noted dryly. Exactly. But maybe that's okay. Maybe this is how we begin a new relationship, one based on who I actually am, not who they wished I was. Just don't let them take credit for your success, Taylor warned. Patricia Turner will have half the country club believing she was your secret financial backer within a month. I laughed, knowing she was probably right. I think I can handle my mother now. The difference is, I no longer need her to be different than she is. My assistant Drew appeared at the door. Sorry to interrupt, but the scholarship committee is ready in the conference room. Thanks. I'll be right there. I stood gathering my notes. Want to sit in? Your perspective would be valuable. Taylor raised an eyebrow. The Turner Family Scholarship for Overlooked Students. No thanks, I've got actual work to do while you process your childhood trauma through philanthropy. Her bluntness made me laugh again. Fair enough. But it's good trauma processing. 10 full scholarships for middle children. From families with limited resources, students who've shown potential but haven't received the support they need. Like I said, processing trauma through good works. Classic recovered middle child behavior. She stood to leave but paused at the door. For what it's worth, Fiona, I'm glad your family underestimated you. Hearth and heritage wouldn't exist if they hadn't. Neither would this version of me, I acknowledged. And I like this version much better than the one still waiting for Patricia Turner's approval. The scholarship meeting went well. We finalized the selection criteria and application process, ensuring the funds would reach students who truly needed them. Afterward, I took a solitary walk through the nearly empty Carson building, my footsteps echoing in the grand Art Deco lobby that would soon house our flagship store. My phone buzzed again. Amanda. This time. Can we talk? Just us? No mom? No Jackson? No agenda? I want to hear about your journey. The real story. I considered ignoring it as I had most of my family's messages over the past few days. But something about her request seemed genuine. Perhaps this was the beginning of actually seeing each other as adults, as individuals, rather than as the roles we'd been assigned in the Turner family drama. Coffee tomorrow at 10. The shop across from the Carson building, I texted back. Her response came immediately. I'll be there. Thank you. That evening, I drove to the Hearth and Heritage production facility for our delayed holiday celebration. Unlike the stiff, formal gathering at my parents' home, this was warm and genuinely joyful. Tables had been set up among the workstations, decorated with items we'd made ourselves. Artisans and their families mingled with office staff and shipping personnel, everyone connected by the common purpose of creating something meaningful together. Marcus, our production manager, gave a short toast to Fiona, who saw possibility where others didn't in this old warehouse, in traditional crafts, and in each of us. And to all of you who turn possibility into reality every day, may we continue to build not just beautiful objects, but a beautiful community. As glasses were raised and genuine warmth filled the room, I felt the truth of what I'd been slowly learning over the past 2 years. Success wasn't about proving my worth to those who had undervalued me. It wasn't about revenge or vindication or even recognition. Success was about creating something authentic. Something that reflected my own values and vision. Something that connected people, rather than ranked them in artificial hierarchies. The forgotten middle child at the Christmas table had been reborn, not as a corporate titan or social climber, but as a leader who valued substance over status, collaboration over competition, and genuine connection over superficial climber. Approval. The irony wasn't lost on me in being overlooked by my family. I'd been given the freedom to see myself clearly, to build something that wasn't constrained by their limited vision of who I could be. Their forgetting me had been perhaps the greatest gift they could have given. And that revelation that being forgotten had ultimately set me free was the most valuable present I could have ever received. Have you ever been overlooked by people who should have valued you, only to discover that their oversight became your greatest strength? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes our most painful experiences lead to our most authentic paths. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming family dynamics and finding your own value. Share with someone who might need a reminder that being underestimated can be the beginning of something extraordinary. Thank you for listening to Fiona's story, and I wish you the courage to reveal your own empire, whatever form it may take.